Okay, we're recording. I'm doing it on the computer and on the phone in case there's a problem, because it's already almost 8 in the morning. Good morning, everybody. And so the purpose of our video today is to basically look at chi, blood, and body fluids, our vital substances, what they are, how they're formed, why they're so closely, how they interact with each other, and why they're so closely related. And then how that affects the pathology of chi, blood, body fluid. So basically, we break these down, and it's somewhat of an artificial breakdown. As I mentioned yesterday, often conditions are complicated. There's a lot of things going on. But it helps you when you see a very complicated case to say, how can I break this apart to understand? They seem to have problems in all the jowls, all the organs, all the vital substances. How can I break it down to look at what is a place I can start with them? And so I'm gonna share the screen here and share the desktop. Okay, so we'll look at this. So we're looking at I'm gonna look at the body fluids first. I think you understand chi pretty good, though we'll review that. But the fluids, the Jin and Ye, are the organic liquids of the body. So that means all of the normal physiological fluids of the body. This includes all those fluids that we talk about in 5 phases relating to the organs. So tears, sweat, saliva, mucus, spittle, digestive fluids. And it also includes those deeper fluids like the fluids that moisten the internal organs, the bones, the marrow, the joints, the skin, the flesh, etc. So it's the interstitial fluids, it's the lymph fluids, it's the fluids that are part of the circulatory system, and to some extent that includes blood. Blood is a separate thing, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So the important things to note about it is that both the Jin and the Ye are a yin substance. So that includes both the thin and thick fluids. And then there's also what you'll often hear people refer to the pure and turbid. And that's part of the Sanjiao mechanism when fluids are being broken down. So as fluids descend to the lower jiao, the turbid descends and the pure ascends, and we'll look at that in a minute. Phlegm is not included in this. So phlegm is not a physiological fluid. And although, sometimes people will conflate mucus and phlegm, they're definitely not the same. So mucus becomes phlegm when it becomes pathological, but when it's bathing your mucosal linings and helping you sneeze out a pathogenic factor, that's your normal, healthy mucus doing its job. Okay, so chi is our life force, it's vitality, life energy. Don't let Barry hear you just call it energy, because it gets them all riled up, or maybe do that. Okay, so chi is the force that makes up and binds together all things in the universe. It's simultaneously physical, mental, spiritual. It underlies all existence. It is both the refined energy that is produced by the Zongfu, so the whole Sanjiao mechanism making chi. It's both that, it includes that, and it includes the function of those organs. So the spleen's chi separating the pure and turbid is a chi, and when it makes the gu chi, the spleen extrapolates the gu chi from that, that is the chi. That type of chi is also a chi. So all of those things, it's that vitality that underlies everything. It really is what connects all the universe. So it's amazing. You know, it's like when you had the Wu Ji in the beginning, just the empty circle. It's that Tai Chi pole that separates, and it's chi that connects that yin and yang polarity. So it really is the thing that begins the breakdown for the myriad of things. Okay, so yeah, as I say here, it activates our Jing. So our Jing, our essence, what we're made up of, it just sits there unless it is enlivened. So that is Jing doing that. And then our Shen is often called the Shen Qi. And we're going to look at that closer when we look at the heart. We'll look at all the different manifestations of that. And again, that's an artificial breakdown because these things are always happening together. The body, mind, spirit are always happening together. And when they're fractured, it affects all of them. So we'll see that when we get into more complicated cases. Blood is a precious substance. It nourishes and moistens. So we have the yin qi, right? That's the nourishing qi. Blood is a fluid that is going to be circulating with that yin qi in order to nourish the organs and the tissues, etc. And then blood, it moistens all parts of the body. So the skin, the sinews, the organs, etc. Similar to what we saw with the fluids here. We're going to see how closely they're related because blood is also a yin substance. So even though it is a very dense material form of qi, that material is the part that makes this yin. So blood is yin, Jin-ye are yin substances, and qi is a yang substance if we're breaking them down into yin and yang. So qi depends on blood and Jin-ye to be its vehicle throughout the body, and blood and Jin-ye depend on qi to be their motivating force. So these vital substances constantly interact with each other. They're constantly transforming into each other. So we use our qi to produce blood and substances. You know, we use our qi to do the digestive breakdown. And we, I'm going to switch this, well, switch the screen in a second. When we need qi on the surface of the body, or we need qi to move, our blood allows that qi to go. So they're constantly working together. So that's and constantly transforming into each other. So let's just see if I can look real quick back at the whiteboard. Hopefully it's still on there. Oh yeah. There's our Sanjiao guy. So this is the Sanjiao mechanism, basically. And so I want us to look at how these are formed, just briefly to remind you why they're so interrelated. Here's the food and drinks. We eat them. It goes down into the stomach. So this breakdown here in the mouth, breakdown in the stomach. We're separating the pure and turbid. At this stage, we are really making the Jin, the Ye, the blood, all of that really happens in the middle jiao. So as that, the spleen ascends the gu qi and the red substance to the upper jiao, that's when we really talk about it. Now it's blood and yin qi. And then, you know, there's a lot of We don't have to get into all the details about how Wei Qi is formed. I know y'all already discussed that last year, and we can revisit it if needed. But this middle jiao is where we're really thinking about these digestive fluids, and then as the stomach is separating the pure and turbid, it's this more pure aspect of it that's going to ascend, and the more impure aspect of it to descend. Now that impure does not mean waste until it's coming out right here as urine and feces. But in here, it's still working to provide passage for the digestive tract, nourish the fluids of the whole lower jiao. And there's further breakdown. So it's like, okay, well, how can the spleen further separate that pure and turbid? And so we have that, whatever it can use. So we look, we look at this small intestine is really governing that, that thick fluids. And whatever it has, pure aspect is going to send to the kidneys. That is for supporting postnatal Jing. So that's like, oh, you did a good job. You got enough to digest. You have enough to support your kidneys. Prenatal Jing with postnatal Jing forms kidney Jing, right? And so this small intestine is going to descend that impure down to the large intestine. It's going to extrapolate back any of the pure fluids that it can and circulate those in the system. And then the bladder is also going to do that same thing. And when it's done, it is going to excrete the waste fluids. And the large intestine is also excreting any waste fluids with the feces. So here we have this production of our vital substances. And maybe I should just say qi here because we're really going to include all those types of usable qi here. So we've got blood, qi, body fluids, and even postnatal Jing. And, I thought that would get us to where we wanted to go. Okay, so then the important thing to think about is, I'm going to pause here for a second. To see if that's, of course I don't know how to pause that, so if we go with this recording, you will see my pause. I have a list. I thought I had it sitting in front of me to make sure we covered all the important points. I don't have time for this. Okay. Oh well. Okay, so now that we remembered how closely related these vital substances are, it can help us understand their pathology a little better. So each of the pathologies, qi, blood, and body fluid, all have a excess or a deficiency. And we talked about that yesterday, but I'm just going to review it because I want to make sure it's clear, and we didn't talk about every one, and I know everybody has some questions about this. So this would basically be like me doing the homework for you. So we're going to look at these from an 8 principle standpoint in terms of excess, deficiency, and if hot and cold applies, we'll say that, and if internal, external applies, we'll say that. Okay, so qi deficiency is basically a lack of qi. That's what it is. That can be a lack of qi for the zong fu not functioning properly, or it can be like, I'm tired, I don't have any energy. That is a lack of qi. So those are typically the symptoms is lethargy, tired, you can't, when you get into specific organs, you can have shortness of breath, that's the lungs, or loose stools, that's the spleen. Those are deficiencies. You might also have frequent urination, pale and copious, then that's the kidneys, or the bladder maybe even. So just to give you an example, remember what your Zongfu organs do. What are their functions? And then when those functions are not functioning, that it can be a qi deficiency. It can also be a stagnation or something like that. But if they just aren't working, their qi is deficient. So a lack of qi, that's obviously a deficiency. That's an internal problem too. And qi sinking, we talked about that yesterday, as a excessive spleen qi. That can also be, that is spleen qi on the spectrum of being very deficient, and now it's sinking because the spleen is supposed to hold things in place. That's one of its functions. So when it sinks, you could have it just because the spleen qi is so weak, or you might have a person with excess damp, maybe even phlegm that has accumulated, and now they're showing mixed signs of deficiency, the prolapse, maybe organ prolapse, bladder or uterus, some kind of prolapse, and maybe they've also had excess weight that they've gained, and then that's the damp or potentially phlegm. So in those cases, if it's an excess and a deficiency, you may see mixed signs in the pulses. We'll talk about pulses more when we get together this morning. So qi stagnation is an excess condition. So it can create deficiencies, just like we talked about with the blood, but the stuckness itself, where things are binding up, and this is going to be an energetic binding up because it's just the qi stagnating first. That energetic binding itself is creating an excess, a blockage. Think about an actual something being blocked. You can think about it like an electric fence, or not electric, the invisible fence, or some kind of force field, that is creating a blockage. By the time it's a blood or fluid blockage, you can think about that as a physical barrier that you can see. So because we know how interrelated qi and blood are, that the blood and fluids are relying on the qi to be their vehicle. So if or to be their engine. So if the engine is stuck, then the blood and fluids can also get stuck. And vice versa. If you've got blood or fluid stagnation, the qi's already stuck. Qi is going to be the first thing to get stuck. Sometimes it happens all at once. Then we have other pathologies of qi are basically them moving in the wrong direction, or that's the rebelliousness, and it's not always just up that it's moving. So spleen moving excessively down is also a rebellious qi. So we'll talk about that more later. I know that was a little misconception. Generally, when we see rebellious qi, it is often moving up. I just want you to be aware that it doesn't have to just be moving up. We have the pathologies of movement in the channels, and so that can be just the qi mechanism not working properly. So the qi not moving into and out of the sensory portals. So you saw that in those boxes in your textbook of, now you're getting blurry vision if the qi is not ascending, or you're getting sticky eyes, stickiness in the eyes if it's not descending, and that being a qi problem. Well, just the stickiness in the eye, you can see that the fluid is impacted. That's that close relationship of the qi and the Jin-ye there that we're looking at. And then that whole section on entering and exiting of qi, the way that qi is able to come into and out of a sensory portal, like we talked about, a joint, or an internal organ. And that's a very important mechanism of qi, is to be able to enter and exit. Think about that on a cellular level when we see nutrients crossing that cell membrane. Even just the balance of sodium and potassium in a cell is a really very good basic example of looking at qi coming across the border and how that affects the fluid mechanism. So those are basic pathologies of qi, and we can see how already those affect the fluids. And so when we're looking at the qi stagnation, qi deficiencies, and in the deficiencies, we see some kind of weakness or some kind of lack of function. That's the deficiencies. Or the sinking, that's a lack of the function of the spleen holding things up. When we see things that are stuck, what we get is pain or distension, because things are stuck where they should have been moving. So you can get that expanded, bloating, distended feeling, irritability. Think about you're driving along in traffic and now all of a sudden you're stuck. If you're trying to get somewhere, it's irritating, agitating. Now you're like, I gotta call somebody, I gotta do this. People are honking their horns. It's irritating. This is where it's important to be able to go with the flow and be like, oh, I'm stuck now, so maybe I just meditate while I'm sitting here. It's just an example. Okay, so let's look at blood pathology next. So we basically have our deficiencies. Blood deficiency. Now, the blood was nourishing, moistening, and helping to enliven. So now we're going to get symptoms like numbness or tingling, because those tissues aren't being nourished. Maybe coldness. Other things that we see are poor memory, the blood not nourishing the brain. We maybe get dizziness, the blood not nourishing the upper regions. You can get all kinds of deficiency headaches too. That's another, we'll see those more when we look at the internal organ pathology. And then you're going to get pale tongue, pale lips, pale complexion. Those because the blood is not nourishing. It's not circulating to give you that rosy complexion, or that brightness, to that alive look to your complexion. When you get a stagnation, that's going to be an excess. So now the blood is stuck, and when the blood is stuck, as we said earlier, the qi is already stuck. The blood's stuck now too. You have a fixed stabbing pain. So it's fixed because there is a substance that's now bound there. So you get a fixed stabbing pain. You can get unmoving masses. So you press in there and you can feel something that's stuck. The tongue is now going to be purple or maybe dark in color, and the same with the complexion or the skin. Think of bruising. That's going to be your symptomatology. The blood stores the Shen. Oh yeah, I didn't read that on our thing earlier, but that's the important thing. The blood is the fluids, qi, and it houses the Shen. So it's a very important substance. So when you have blood pathologies, there's definitely going to be some emotional signs and symptoms of some sort. The shin is going to be affected. So heat in the blood is also an excess condition. Heat itself is the presence of a pathogenic factor, and heat in the blood is going to cause you to feel hot. It's going to cause skin eruptions, skin diseases, skin pathologies, bleeding pathologies that of a hot nature. And you'll also see specific organ signs and symptoms. So when we get into liver heat and heart heat and things like that, we'll see some other blood patterns that we're going to look at. And then loss. Blood loss is also a deficiency. So hemorrhaging, and that can come from, that's typically, childbirth is one of the most common things we think of. So after someone's had a baby, you lose a lot of blood and fluids. So that's our basic breakdown of those two. And now the pathology of the Jin and the Ye. So again, you also have excesses and deficiencies of this. And to be clear, we have not talked about the causes of these so much. I mean, you've talked about causes of disease in the past, and I want you to understand that these causes can basically come from the exterior or, climate impact or emotional impact, internal causes. They can come from organ dysfunction or eating too much of something. They can come from a lot of causes. Once this pathology is there, though, the pathology itself is an excess or deficiency. You can certainly have a mixed condition, so those are things to consider. So our deficiencies are going to be fluid deficiency. So you'll see that a lot in yin deficiencies in the organs. So we'll see that when we start our Zongfu pathologies next month. And it's going to be things like dry skin, dry mouth, dry nose, dry lips, dry tongue, and things that we think about, obvious things when you have dryness, there is not fluid. There will be some overlap with blood because blood deficiency can also cause dryness. Blood deficiency, blood has fluid in it. So when the blood is deficient, there's some fluid deficiency. It's just which one is predominating. And we'll talk about, the definitive signs are going to usually be in your tongue and complexion on that. So we'll also see deeper fluid deficiencies. So when the organs are dry, and that can come from internal inflammation, burning up the internal fluids. It can come from lack of fluids in the diet. Those cases you'll be typically seeing external drynesses and internal drynesses. We'll get a condition, what we call Zong Sao, and we'll talk about that more later, especially when we talk about emotional disorders. And then we have our excesses. So the excess of fluid is the edema. And so that edema has basically it's leakage of your normal physiological fluids over into the pathways, into the soli. And that can come from, yes, a yang deficiency, spleen, kidney, lung. What are we really talking about there? Sanjiao. But it can come from yang deficiencies of those particular organs and create this excess of fluid. We'll see that a lot in the lower limbs. Though when you get that wind invasion, we talked about damp accumulating on the surface, and that would be from an exterior cause, but can be from a yang deficiency, not either transforming the fluids properly or moving the fluids properly. But it can also come from an excess. So the edema itself is some sort of excess, which can come from a yang deficiency, or you have a person with qi stag or damp already accumulating that has now led to a edema situation. So that qi stag not allowing the fluids to flow properly. You can think about that in an injury, or maybe, you could think about that in an injury and you get swelling or edema in an area. And then we have phlegm. Now, phlegm is either, you could look at it as a failure of the Sanjiao mechanism, or as the way the Sanjiao mechanism is using fluids to contain a pathogenic factor. So phlegm gets quite complicated, and we're going to talk about that more when we get together later. So I'm going to end for now, and I will see you all in a couple hours. Bye.